The morning sun cast long shadows across the neutral ground where two armies faced each other. On one side stood the Fire Clan warriors, their armor gleaming like molten gold in the light. On the other side, human soldiers gripped their weapons tightly, sweat beading on their foreheads despite the cool morning air. Between them sat a wooden table where the peace talks were supposed to happen. But peace felt like a distant dream right now. Seraphina rode her horse slowly toward the meeting point. Her red hair flowed behind her like flames, and her eyes burned with the same intensity. She was the daughter of the Fire Lord, trained from childhood to be a warrior. The magical sword at her side, Solar Flame, hummed with ancient power. Everyone knew that only she could touch it without getting burned. Captain Darien watched her approach from across the field. He was a seasoned warrior who had fought in many battles for his kingdom. His brown hair was streaked with early gray, and his face bore the scars of countless fights. But he had never faced anything like the Fire Clan before. The peace talks had been going on for 3 days now, and they were getting nowhere. The Fire Clan wanted the humans to stay away from their sacred lands. The humans wanted access to the magical crystals that could power their cities. Neither side was willing to give up what they wanted most. "We've been patient long enough," General Aldrich muttered to Darien as they watched Seraphina dismount her horse. "These fire people think they're better than us just because they can play with magic." Darien nodded but said nothing. He'd seen what Fire Clan magic could do in battle. It wasn't something to take lightly. The meeting began like all the others. Elder Perion, Seraphine's grandfather, spoke in his calm, measured voice about the ancient agreements between their peoples. Human diplomat, Lord Brennan, countered with talk of progress and the needs of growing cities. But today felt different. There was tension in the air that hadn't been there before. Maybe it was because both sides were getting tired of talking without getting anywhere. Maybe it was because winter was coming and everyone knew that would make any conflict much worse. "People speak of honor," Seraphina said suddenly, interrupting the formal discussions. Her voice was clear and strong, carrying across the field. "But what do you really know about honor?" Darien looked up from the maps they had been studying. "We know enough," he replied. "We've kept our word in every agreement we've made." "Have you?" Seraphina stood up, her hand moving to rest on her sword's handle. "Your scouts have been seen near our sacred groves. Your miners have been testing the ground at our borders. Is this what humans call keeping your word?" The accusations hung in the air like smoke. Lord Brennan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Those were ... unofficial activities, not sanctioned by our government." "Unofficial?" Seraphine's laugh was sharp. "So you can't even control your own people, yet you want us to trust you with access to our lands?" General Aldrich stood up, his face red with anger. "Watch your tongue, girl. You're speaking to representatives of the crown. And you're speaking to a daughter of the Fire Lord," Seraphina shot back. "I've earned my place at this table through skill and blood, not through birth alone." Darien could see the situation spiraling out of control. He had been in enough negotiations to know when things were about to fall apart. "Perhaps we should take a break," he suggested. "Let everyone cool down." But Seraphina was beyond cooling down. "You humans are all the same. Talk about strength and courage, but when it comes to real testing, you hide behind your politics and your excuses." "That's not true," Darien said, standing up to face her. "We've proven our courage in battle many times." "Against other humans, maybe," Seraphina replied. "But would you dare to test yourself against real power? Against magic that has been forged in the heart of the earth itself?" The other Fire Clan warriors began to murmur among themselves. They knew their princess well enough to recognize the dangerous tone in her voice. Elder Perion tried to speak, but Seraphina was already moving. In one fluid motion, she drew Solar Flame from its sheath. The sword blazed to life, flames dancing along its edge like living creatures. Heat from it could be felt even from several feet away. The human soldiers instinctively stepped back, their hands moving to their own weapons. "You want to talk about strength?" Seraphina raised the flaming sword high above her head. "Then show me. Show me this human courage you're so proud of." With a swift motion, she drove the sword point first into the ground between herself and Darien. The flames roared higher, and the grass around the blade began to smoke. "Pick it up," she challenged, her eyes locked on his. If your people are so strong, then pick up my sword. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone present knew what she was asking. Solar Flame was no ordinary weapon. It was forged with ancient magic, bonded to the Fire Clan bloodline. Anyone else who tried to touch it would be burned to ash in seconds, or so everyone believed. Darian stared at the sword, could feel the heat radiating from it, could see the flames dancing along its edge. This was madness, this was certain. Death. But he could also feel the eyes of his men on him, could hear the whispered conversations of the Fire Clan warriors. If he backed down now, the peace talks would be over. His people would be seen as cowards who couldn't match the Fire Clans. Strength. The war that everyone was trying to avoid would become inevitable. But if he tried to pick up the sword and failed, he would die. And his death would probably start the war anyway. Darian, don't, General Aldrich whispered urgently. This is suicide. But Darian was already walking forward. Each step brought him closer to the blazing weapon. The heat grew more intense with every inch. His skin began to tingle, then burn. Still, he kept walking. You don't have to do this, Serafina said, and for the first time, there was uncertainty in her voice. This was just, I didn't mean ... but it was too late for second thoughts. Darian reached out his hand toward the sword's handle. Seemed to sense his approach, leaping higher and burning brighter. He could smell his own hair beginning to singe, then his fingers closed around the grip. The world seemed to stop. Everyone expected to see him burst into flames, to hear his screams as the magic consumed him. Instead, something impossible happened. Flames didn't burn him. They danced around his hand like they were greeting an old friend. The sword felt warm in his grip, but it was a comfortable warmth. It's like sitting by a fireplace on a cold night. Slowly, hardly believing what was happening, Darian lifted the sword from the ground. The flames continued to play around the blade. But they didn't harm him. If anything, they seemed to be responding to his touch. Burning brighter and more beautifully than they had even for Serafina. The silence stretched on as everyone tried to process what they were seeing. A human warrior holding a Fire Clan magical sword, not only surviving but seeming to command its power. Elder Pyrian was the first to speak, his voice barely a whisper. By the ancient laws, this is not possible, but it was happening. Darian stood there, holding Solar Flame, feeling its power flowed through him like nothing he had ever experienced. He looked at Serafina, whose face had gone pale with shock and something that might have been fear. What have we done? She whispered. That was when Elder Pyrian's expression changed from shock to something much more serious. Something that would change both their lives forever. Elder Pyrian's face had turned white as winter snow. His hands trembled as he reached for the ancient book he always carried with him. The old leather cover was worn smooth from centuries of use, and the pages inside contained laws that most people had forgotten existed. Put the sword down, he whispered to Darian, his voice shaking. Put it down right now. But Darian couldn't move. The sword felt like it belonged in his hand, like he had been meant to hold it his whole life. The flames continued to dance around, the blade warm and welcoming. He had never felt anything like this before. What's happening? Serafina demanded, looking between her grandfather and the human warrior who was holding her most precious possession. Why can he touch it? No one else has ever been able to touch Solar Flame. Elder Pyrian was frantically flipping through the pages of his book. The other Fire Clan warriors moved closer, their own weapons ready, but uncertain. They had never seen anything like this before either. Here, the old man said finally, his finger pointing to a page covered in ancient writing. The Flame Bond. I hoped I would never see this in my lifetime. The what? General Aldrich stepped forward, his hand on his sword. What are you talking about, old man? Elder Pyrian looked up from his book, his eyes grave. When a Fire Clan warrior challenges another to wield their flame weapon, and that person succeeds, it creates a magical bond between them. The flames only accept those whose souls are compatible with the weapon's true owner. Serafina felt her heart drop into her stomach. No, that's impossible. The old laws about soul bonding are just stories. They're not real. They're very real, her grandfather replied sadly. And now they bind you to this human warrior. The ancient law states that two souls joined by flame magic must choose one of two paths. Darien finally managed to speak. What paths? Combat to the death, Elder Perion said quietly. Or marriage. The words hit the gathering like a thunderbolt. Several of the human soldiers started laughing, thinking it was some kind of joke. The Fire Clan warriors weren't laughing. They knew their laws, and they knew Elder Perion would never make light of something so serious. That's ridiculous, Lord Brennan sputtered. We're not living in the Dark Ages. You can't force two people to marry just because of some old superstition. It's not superstition, Elder Perion said firmly. Look at the sword. Look how it responds. To him, the magic doesn't lie. Everyone turned to look at Darien again. The flames around Solar Flame were still burning bright, still dancing around his hand like they were happy to be there. There was no denying that something magical was happening. This is insane, Serafina said, her voice rising, challenged. Him to prove a point, not to bind our souls together. I didn't know this would happen. The magic doesn't care what you intended, her grandfather replied. It only cares what you did. You issued a flame challenge, and he accepted it. Bond is already formed. Darien carefully set the sword down on the ground, stepping away from it. But even after he let go, he could still feel something connecting him to the weapon, and through it, to Serafina. It was like a warm thread running between them, invisible, but definitely there. So what happens now? He asked. Are we supposed to fight to the death, right here? I would end the peace talks permanently, General Aldrich said grimly. If you die, we go to war. If she dies, we go to war. Neither option helps anyone. Elder Perion nodded slowly, which is why the ancient law includes the second option. Marriage would bind your peoples together, not just your souls. It would make this alliance permanent. I won't be forced into marriage, Serafina said angrily. I won't be traded like a piece of property to seal some political deal, and I won't marry someone I barely know, Darien added. Even if she is, ... double quotes. He paused, looking at her. Even angry. And frustrated, she was beautiful. Her red hair caught the sunlight like fire, and her green eyes blazed with emotion. But beauty wasn't enough to build a life on. There has to be another way, Lord Brennan said desperately. Some way to break this bond. Elder Perion was quiet for a long moment, reading through more pages in his ancient book. There might be, he said finally. But it would require a journey to the old temples, and the knowledge might be lost forever. Many of the sacred places were destroyed in the Great Wars centuries ago. How long would we have to decide? Serafina asked. The bond grows stronger with time, her grandfather replied. If you're going to break it, you would need to do it soon. Maybe a month, possibly. 2 at most. After that, the magic becomes permanent. Darien looked at Serafina, and she looked back at him. In her eyes, he saw the same mixture of fear and determination that he was feeling. Neither of them wanted to be forced into this situation, but neither of them wanted to die either. What? If we agreed to a temporary engagement, he suggested, it's just until we can figure out how to break the bond. It would satisfy the law for now and give us time to find another solution. A fake engagement? Serafina considered this. We would have to spend time together, act like we were actually planning to marry. It's better than the alternatives, Darien pointed out. General Aldrich cleared his throat. This could actually work for the peace negotiations. A royal engagement between our peoples would show good faith on both sides. And it would give us time to search for a way to break the bond, Elder Perion added. That might have the information we need, but reaching them would be dangerous. Serafina looked at her grandfather. How dangerous? The old temples are in the borderlands, where neither humans nor Fire Clan have maintained control. There are wild beasts, unstable magic, and worse things that hunt in those forgotten places. We'd have to travel together, Darien realized. Just the two of us? A large group would attract too much attention, and we'd have to trust each other, Serafina added. Our lives would depend on it. They stood there in silence, both thinking about what they were agreeing to. It wasn't just a fake engagement they were considering. It was a dangerous journey into unknown territory with someone who had been their enemy just hours before. I need some time to think about this, Serafina said finally. We don't have much time, Elder Pirian warned. The longer you wait, the stronger the bond becomes. And there are other complications. What other complications? Darian asked. Bond doesn't just connect your souls, the old man explained. It will start affecting your abilities, your emotions, even your dreams. You'll begin to feel what the other person feels. In some ways, you're already becoming two halves of the same whole. As if to prove his point, Darian suddenly felt a flash of fear and anger that wasn't his own. He looked at Seraphina and saw. Her eyes widened with surprise. She was feeling something too. It's already starting, Elder Pirian said sadly. The choice is yours, but you need to make it soon. The magic won't wait for you to be ready. Seraphina took a deep breath. Fine, Will. Do the engagement. But this is temporary, and we're going to find a way to break this bond. Agreed, Darian said. But we do this properly. We work together to find a solution, and we don't let anyone else get hurt because of our situation. They reached out and shook hands on the agreement. The moment their skin touched, both of them felt the magical connection flared brighter. Whatever they had gotten themselves into, there was no going back now. The fake engagement had begun, but neither of them realized just how real it would become. 3 days after their forced engagement, Seraphina and Darian set out on their journey to find the ancient temples. The morning was cold and gray, with thick clouds hanging low over the mountains. They rode their horses side by side, but the silence between them was heavy and uncomfortable. We should reach the first temple by evening, Seraphina said, looking at the old map her grandfather had given them. If the paths haven't been washed out by the recent storms. Darian nodded, adjusting his pack. And if we don't run into any of those wild beasts your grandfather mentioned? They had been traveling for only a few hours when they felt it. A sudden shared flash of nervousness that belonged to neither of them alone. Both riders pulled their horses to a stop at the same time. Did you feel that? Seraphina asked. Fear wasn't mine, Darian replied, looking around carefully. Something's watching us. From the thick forest beside the mountain path, a low growl echoed through the trees. Then another. And another. Soon they were surrounded by the sounds of hungry predators. Shadow wolves, Seraphina whispered. They hunt in packs and they're smart. Much smarter than regular wolves. The first wolf stepped onto the path ahead of them. It was huge, with fur so dark it seemed to absorb the light around it. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural silver light. Behind it, more wolves began to emerge from the forest. How many? Darian asked, his hand moving to his sword. Too many, Seraphina replied. She drew solar flame, and the blade burst into flames. But fire might scare them off. The wolves didn't seem scared. Instead, they seemed curious about the flaming sword. The pack leader tilted its head, studying them with intelligent eyes. They're not attacking, Darian observed. They're waiting for something. That's when they heard it. A roar that shook the ground beneath their horses' feet. Something much bigger than wolves was coming through the forest, breaking trees as it moved. Dragon Bear, Seraphina said, her face going pale. We need to get out of here right now. But there was nowhere to go. The wolves blocked the path ahead and behind them. The forest on both sides was too thick for horses to pass through quickly. They were trapped. The dragon bear burst through the trees like a living avalanche. It stood twice as tall as a man, with scales mixed in with its dark fur. Its breath came out in puffs of poisonous green smoke, and its claws were long enough to cut through armor like paper. The wolves are working with it, Darian realized. They drove us here on purpose. The dragon bear charged and everything happened. At once, Darian leaped from his horse, rolling to avoid the creature's massive claws. Seraphina swung solar flame in a wide arc, sending a wave of fire toward the beast. But the dragon bear's scales protected it from the flames. The fire's not working, she shouted. Then we try something else, Darian replied. He had noticed something about the way the wolves were positioned. They weren't just blocking escape routes. They were protecting something. The cubs, he said. Look behind the big rock. There are dragon bear cubs back there. It's not hunting us for food. It's protecting its babies. Seraphina saw what he meant. 3 small dragon bear cubs were huddled behind a large boulder, watching the fight with wide, frightened eyes. "If we can get past without threatening the cubs, maybe it will let us go," she said. "Maybe, but we need to work together." For the first time since their bond was formed, they moved as a true team. Darian used his military training to predict the dragon bear's attacks, while Serafina used her fire magic to create distractions. They didn't try to hurt the creature. Instead, they danced around it, showing that they weren't a threat to its family. Slowly, carefully, they worked their way around the edge of the clearing. The dragon bear followed their every move, but it didn't attack as long as they stayed away from its cubs. "Almost there," Darian whispered. "Just a few more steps." That's when Seraphine's foot slipped on a loose rock. She tumbled down a small slope, landing hard against a tree. Her ankle twisted painfully, and she couldn't get up. The dragon bear saw her fall and took it as an attack. It roared and charged toward her, claws raised to strike. Without thinking, Darian threw himself between them, caught the dragon bear's claws on his shield, but the force of the blow sent him flying backward. He hit the ground hard, and his sword went spinning away into the bushes. "Darian!" Serafina screamed. The dragon bear raised its claws for a finishing blow. But before it could strike, something amazing happened. Seraphine's fire magic suddenly flared brighter than ever before. But instead of coming from her sword, it came from her hands. And somehow, impossibly, the same flames appeared around Darian's hands too. The shared magic was so bright and powerful that it lit up the entire clearing. The dragon bear stepped back, confused. It had never seen magic like this before. "Together," Serafina said, reaching out toward Darian. "We can do this together." Darian took her hand, and their combined magic created a wall of protective fire around them. Didn't hurt the dragon bear, but it showed the creature that they were far more powerful than it had thought. The dragon bear looked at its cubs, then at the 2 humans surrounded by impossible flames. It made a decision. With a final growl that sounded almost like a warning, it gathered its cubs and disappeared back into the forest. The wolves followed, melting away into the shadows as if they had never been there. "How did we do that?" Darian asked, looking at his hands where the flames had been. "I don't know," Serafina replied, "but I think the bond is stronger than we thought." They helped each other up, and Darian supported Serafina as she limped back to their horses. Her ankle was hurt but not broken. They would be able to continue their journey. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for protecting me back there." "Thank you for saving both of us with that magic," he replied. "I've never felt anything like that." Before, as they rode away from the clearing, both of them were thinking the same thing. The bond between them was growing stronger, and it was changing them in ways they didn't understand. But for the first time, that didn't seem like such a terrible thing. The ancient temple stood like a broken tooth against the evening sky. Half of its stone walls had crumbled away, and thick vines covered most of what remained. But deep inside, they could see the faint glow of magical crystals that had been burning for centuries. "This place gives me the creeps," Darian said, tying their horses to a sturdy tree. "It should," Serafina replied, studying the strange symbols carved into the temple's entrance. "These temples were built to test people. The magic here can read your heart and show you things you don't want to see." They had been traveling together for 2 weeks now, and the bond between them had grown stronger every day. Sometimes they would start speaking at the same time, saying exactly the same words. Other times, one of them would reach for something just as the other person was about to hand it to them. It was like they were becoming 2 parts of the same person. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Darian asked. "According to the map, this is the Temple of True Sight," Serafina said. "If there's information about breaking flame bonds anywhere, it would be here." They lit their torches and stepped through the crumbling entrance. The inside of the temple was surprisingly well preserved. The walls were covered with paintings that seemed to move in the flickering torchlight. Ancient writing covered every surface, telling stories of love and loss, of bonds made and broken. "Look at this," Serafina said, pointing to a large painting on the far wall. "It shows 2 people holding hands, surrounded by flames. And here, ... She moved her torch closer. The flames are turning into chains. But look at the next painting, Darian said. The same two people, but now they're choosing to hold hands even though the chains are gone. They're free, but they're staying together. They moved deeper into the temple, following a corridor that led to a circular chamber. In the center of the room stood a crystal altar, glowing with soft blue light. Ancient books sat on stone shelves. Around the walls, their pages somehow untouched by time. "This is it," Serafina whispered. "The knowledge we need should be here." But as they approached the altar, the temple's magic activated. The walls began to glow, and suddenly they weren't in the temple anymore. They were standing in a vision. Watching scenes from their own lives play out around them, Darian saw himself as a young boy, training with his father. "A warrior's greatest strength is in his sword," his father was saying. "It's his ability to protect those who can't protect themselves." Serafina saw herself at her first flame ceremony when she had bonded with Solar Flame. "This sword will be part of you forever," Elder Parian had told her. "It will know your heart better than you know it yourself." Then the visions changed. They saw themselves from the day they met, but now they could see things they hadn't noticed before. When Darian had first seen Serafina, there had been admiration in his eyes, not just anger. When Serafina had challenged him, there had been hope in her voice, not just pride. "We were drawn to each other from the beginning," Serafina realized. "The bond didn't create our connection, it just made it visible." The visions continued, showing them moments from their journey together. Every time one of them had been in danger, the other had risked everything to help. Every time they had shared a laugh or a quiet conversation by the campfire, the bond between them had grown stronger. "But why?" Darian asked. "Why us?" The temple answered by showing them one final vision. They saw themselves as they were now, but also as they could be in the future. Leading their peoples together, building a bridge between two worlds that had been enemies for too long. Their bond wasn't just about them. It was about healing the wounds between their peoples. When the visions ended, they found themselves back in the temple chamber. On the altar, a new book had appeared. Its pages were filled with information about flame bonds, including the ritual to break them. "Here it is," Serafina said, reading from the ancient text. "The ritual of sundering. It can break any magical bond, no matter how strong." "What does it require?" Darian asked. Seraphine's face fell as she read further. "One person has to give up their magical abilities forever. All of them. They become completely ordinary, unable to use even the smallest magic." "For you, that would mean giving up your fire magic," Darian said. "Your connection to Solar Flame. Everything that makes you who you are, and for you." Serafina paused. "It says here that the bond has awakened magic in you that you never knew you had. If we break it, you'll lose that too." They stood in silence, each thinking about what this meant. To break the bond, one of them would have to sacrifice a fundamental part of themselves. "There's something else," Serafina said, her voice barely a whisper. "The ritual can only be performed by someone who truly wants to be free. If there's any doubt, any part of you that wants to keep the bond, the ritual will fail. And if it fails, the bond becomes permanent, unbreakable. We would be connected forever, whether we want to be or not." Darian took the book from her hands and read the passage himself. The words were clear and frightening. They had found the answer they were looking for, but it came with a price that neither of them was sure they could pay. "We should head back," he said finally. "We need time to think about this." As they prepared to leave the temple, Serafina caught Darian's arm. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you saved me from the dragon bear, when you threw yourself between us, ... why did you do it?" Darian was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he said finally. "I just ... I couldn't let you get hurt." "Then the thought of losing you was more frightening than dying myself." "That's what I was afraid you'd say," Serafina replied, "because I felt the same way." They left the temple in silence, both carrying the weight of what they had discovered. They had the power to break their bond, but they weren't sure they wanted to anymore. That uncertainty made the choice even harder. The attack came at dawn. Serafina and Darian were barely awake when they heard the sound of horses thundering toward their camp. They scrambled to their feet, weapons ready, as a group of riders emerged from the morning mist. Fire Clan extremists, Serafina said, recognizing the black and red banners. They're the ones who opposed the peace talks from the beginning. How many? Darien asked, counting the riders. Too many, she replied. And they're not here to talk. The leader of the extremists was a fierce woman named Valeria, Seraphin's own cousin. She had always believed that humans were the enemy, and that any alliance with them was betrayal. Surrender the human, cousin, Valeria called out. You've been bewitched by this false bond. We're here to free you from his influence. The bond isn't false, Serafina replied. And I don't need to be freed from anything. Look at you, Valeria said with disgust. You're defending him. You're choosing a human over your own people. This is exactly what we feared would happen. I'm choosing what's right, Serafina said. This alliance could bring peace to both our peoples. Peace built on lies and magic tricks, Valeria spat. Real strength comes from purity, not from mixing with humans. The extremists surrounded them, weapons drawn. Darien and Serafina stood back to back, ready to fight, but they were outnumbered 10-1. You don't have to do this, Darien said to Valeria. We can find a solution that works for everyone. The only solution is your death, Valeria replied. With you gone, the false bond will break, and my cousin will remember where her loyalties belong. That's not how the bond works, Serafina said. If you hurt him, you hurt me too. Then you'll learn to live with the pain, Valeria said coldly. Attack. The battle was fierce, but short. Darien and Serafina fought with everything they had, their bond allowing them to anticipate each other's moves perfectly. But there were too many enemies, and soon they were overwhelmed. Enough, Valeria shouted. Take them alive. I want them to watch each other suffer. They were dragged to an old fortress that the extremists had been using as a base.
Owls.
Deep underground, in a dungeon carved from solid rock, they were chained to opposite walls. The human dies at sunset, Valeria announced. And you, cousin, will. Watch. Maybe then you'll understand the price of betraying your own kind. After the extremists left, Darien and Serafina were alone in the darkness. The chains that held them were made of special metal that blocked magic, so Serafina couldn't use her fire to break free. I'm sorry, she said quietly. This is all my fault. If I hadn't challenged you that day, none of this would have happened. Don't apologize, Darien replied. I made my choice when I picked up your sword. I knew there might be consequences, but you didn't know it would lead to this. No, he admitted. But I don't regret it. These past few weeks, traveling with you, getting to know you, they've been the best of my life. Serafina felt tears on her cheeks. Mine too, which is why I can't let you die for my mistakes. What are you thinking? The ritual we learned about in the temple. I could perform it right now. I could break the bond and give up my magic. Without the bond connecting us, maybe I could convince Valeria to let you go. No, Darien said firmly. Won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. It's not just for you, Serafina said. It's for our peoples.
No.
If I die here with you, the extremists will use our deaths to justify a war, but if I'm alive and free, I can work to prevent that. There has to be another way. There isn't, and we both know it. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Darien spoke. I think you're going to do this. Need to tell you something first. What? I love you, he said simply. Not because of the bond, not because of magic, but because of who you are. You're brave and strong and kind, and you care about people more than you care about yourself. I love you, and I don't want to lose you. I love you too, Serafina whispered, which is why I have to do this. Wait, Darien said suddenly. The ritual requires someone who truly wants to be free, right? Someone with no doubt? Yes. Why? Because I realized something. I don't want to be free from our bond. I want to be free from these chains, free from this prison, free to build a life with you. I don't want to be free from loving you. Seraphine's eyes widened as she understood what he was saying. If neither of us truly wants to break the bond, then the ritual won't work anyway. Exactly, so we need to find another way out of here. That's when they heard it. Footsteps in the corridor outside their cell. But these weren't the heavy boots of the extremists. These were quieter, more careful. Princess, Captain, a familiar voice called softly. Elder Parian? Seraphina couldn't believe it. Grandfather, what are you doing here? Rescuing you, I hope, the old man replied. I brought help. The cell door opened and Elder Parian entered with a group of Fire Clan and human soldiers working together. It was the first time in centuries that the two armies had cooperated on anything. How did you find us? Darian asked, as they broke his chains. The bond works both ways, Elder Parian explained. When you were in danger, both of your peoples felt it. Your General Aldrich and our Fire Lord decided that saving you was more important than their pride. What about the extremists? Without a fight, once they realized they were outnumbered, one of the soldiers reported. Valeria wants to speak with you, Princess. They found Valeria in the fortress courtyard surrounded by guards. She looked defiant but defeated. I was trying to protect our people, she said to Seraphina. Mixing with humans will make us weak. No, Seraphina replied. It will make us stronger. Look around you. Fire Clan and human soldiers working together saved our lives today. Imagine what we could accomplish if we did this all the time. The bond between you two isn't natural, Valeria insisted. Maybe not, Seraphina agreed, but the feelings are real. The good we can do together is real too. Back at the peace talks, everything had changed. The rescue mission had shown both sides that cooperation was possible. The extremists on both sides had lost their power to disrupt the negotiations. So what happens now? Lord Brennan asked. Are you going to break the bond? Seraphina and Darian looked at each other. They had talked about this during the journey home, and they had made their decision. We're going to get married, Seraphina announced, not because ancient law requires it, but because we choose it. The bond will become permanent, Elder Parian warned. There will be no going back. We know, Darian said, taking Seraphine's hand. We're not trying to escape from love anymore. We're choosing to embrace it. And we're choosing to build something new, Seraphina added. A future where Fire Clan and humans work together, where our children grow up in peace instead of war. The wedding took place a month later at the exact spot where they had first met. Representatives from both peoples attended, and for the first time in centuries, there was real hope for lasting peace. As they exchanged vows, Solar Flame glowed brighter than ever before. The flames that danced along its edge were no longer just Seraphine's magic or Darian's borrowed power. They were something new, something that belonged to both of them together. I love you, Seraphina said, looking into Darian's eyes. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. I love you too, he replied. And I choose you today. And always, when they kissed, the bond between them flared with golden light, visible to everyone present. It was no longer a chain that bound them. It was a bridge that connected their hearts, their peoples, and their futures. Brought them together, but love would keep them together, and that made all the difference.